Hello everyone and welcome to another Third Age Reforged. My name is Cadamfooter and today I have for you a custom scenario made by Sin of the Dark Cloud called the Gap of Rohan. I'm actually going to pause it because this actually starts quite quickly, as you can see a large number of cav. But this battle is a little bit along the lines of sort of what was happening in the outlying areas, the areas that couldn't fall back to sort of Helm's Deep or were sort of assaulted in the early stages, and the kind of last stands that they had from the Isengard advance. So what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly go over the defenders before moving on to the attackers. What I will say is there is a small rules in this scenario. You can see on the minimap there's a large force on this side of the battlefield. They need to wait. They need to wait for about, I think it's about 15 minutes. They wait for their LL to engage, and then when I talk about the unit compositions of the sort of attacking armies, you'll see that some of them have siege weaponry and some don't. Those with siege weaponry must make their way towards the city centre, as the others must try and withstand the onslaught of the cavalry. So, starting with Rohan, then, we have Hung Lo, who has, for his cavalry force outside the city walls, he has some heavy knights, some royal guard, and some royal bodyguards. Sin is taking some riders of the fold, some mounted shield maidens, some more riders of the fold, some heavy lancers, a couple of units of that, some light cavalry from the royal guard there, some bodyguards, more royal guard, some nobles, and some heavy knights again. Sin obviously well versed with cavalry. And the city itself, well, I say city, and more sort of a town, as you can see here. It sort of has this sort of large, possibly rear entrance, maybe even to Helm's Deep. Perhaps this is where they pop out the other side. Although you'd hope not, seeing as the Isengard have already arrived here. Okay, so within the settlement, they're kind of merged in their forces, but this is predominantly going to be Hung Lo's units, but we'll go through. So he's got some Helmingers on the walls, which is what you'd expect. Sort of taunting away there, although they don't look to be taunting particularly much. And they line along the walls significantly. We've got some dismounted Royal Guard here, which are looking to hold the front gates. Looks about 4 units of them. Then further back into the centre itself, back at the town centre, we've got some Marshals of the Red here. Always a fantastic unit to have. And the Helmhammers. If you haven't seen these guys, they look fantastic with their giant shields. And looks about 4 units of them there with a catapult and some additional Marshals of the Red. We also have some Shield Maidens here, ready to make the stand alongside their husbands, brothers, and fathers. Oh, and some Riddermuck Axemen. It's a nice little shock infantry unit there. I like the little gold that they have. Moving over then, we might as well start it off now. Moving over to the Isengard forces, we have Timo, who's one of the other developers, one of the lead developers, in fact. He's got some Uruk-hai Raiders, looks like 2 units of it with ladders, some archers. He has some Dunland veterans. There they are. A few units of those guys. More raiders. More raiders. You can get the basic picture here. There's a lot of raiders. Happy Meal is going to be following alongside him in terms of the main assault. So he's got some Uruk-hai infantry. More raiders. Archers. Archers. Raiders. 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 Reavers. Reavers? Yeah, so we do have some Reavers at the back. Nice unit for their price. They've got armor piercing, and they're going to be very useful against this cavalry. And even Timo has a couple of units in his back lines. And then behind them all, yes, even I am here. You can't have a massive army of raiders and reavers that are going to have to face cavalry charges from Rohan without my fodder units. So I've got some couple of reavers with me. I even put down spikes. Sin wasn't too happy about this, but the Uruk-hai archers could put down spikes. Just before we started, I stuck them down because, oh, why not? None of the others were able to do so in time. Raiders, 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 Reavers, Archers, Raiders, Raiders, Reavers, Archers. So I actually have a slightly larger Reaver force than the other members of my team, but I don't have any units that will be able to assault the town centre. I think we all have 2 units of Archers. Moving over then to the other side of the river, we have sort of the remnants of the little bit of a force that we've got. So Happy Meal has some cavalry, some Nazakai, and his bodyguard. I think this is me here. Yep, so I've got some trolls on the right hand, I've got some bodyguards, I've got some skirmishers, and some walk riders. I love these skirmishers. I think they're so good for the value. As long as you don't get them shot down, those javelins can do some serious damage. And Timo has some guards of Orthanc, and guards of Orthanc. So Timo's force that he's been provided with in this scenario is quite standard. I can see already the cavalry moving away, so I'm just going to pause it while we do the last ones. So we've got Carandol, who's one of the developers. So he's got some archers here, some pikemen. So we're starting to see some proper units from Isengard here. We've got some heavy infantry, crossbows. Finally, last we've got some berserkers, walk riders, a couple of units of those. He does have a few raiders himself, but at least he's been able to mix that in with some much better units like the crossbows. He's got some trolls on the right hand and some Nezakai bodyguard himself. We're also supported by UMAD Commander, who's a YouTuber. If you haven't subscribed to him, please feel free to do so. I highly recommend it. He does some top 10s in terms of infantry types. He does some faction overviews, and he also does some quality versus quantity videos, which are really good for new players to understand a little bit about the intricacies of units and how they work, especially sometimes there's hidden information which you don't always get from first sight. So he's got some reavers in his front line. He does actually have a catapult, which is really handy. He's got pikemen. He's got a few units of archers. He's got some crossbows. I think he's got a couple units of crossbows. He has some nice high himself. Raiders, infantry. Wargs, berserkers, even more trolls. And on the last side, we have Donald, who is a regular in the Discord. Again, if you are ever interested to come along, hang out with us, chat with us, if you haven't already, please feel free to join our Discord. The information should be available below. He has a number of pikemen, crossbow units there, about 3 I think. Some Nazak High, 2 units in fact, if I remember rightly. Yep, 2 units of Nazak High, heavy infantry, some raiders, some reavers, and 2 units of berserkers, a catapult himself, some trolls on the right hand, and some champions on the right hand. So Donald's army, as he wasn't one of the sort of developers or the YouTubers, we gave him the best army that the attackers could have, as we thought that'd be a kind thing to do, whilst the regulars over here are about to get slaughtered. So what's going to happen, I think it's probably relatively obvious, is Hung Lo's smaller force is going to go and harass those units that are going to start making their way towards the city walls. I think basically what he wants to do is try and slow them down as much as possible, hit them in the sides of the units that are carrying siege weaponry, and each time they'll have to dread and drop it. While Sin's main tactic, I think, is going to be trying to slow us down. So we're going to have some epic charges. It's going to be all over the place. I'm going to try and follow it best I can. It might get laggy just because of the sheer number of units, so please bear with me. Let's see how it goes as Sin starts moving his units forward, and I can already feel the lag just from the sheer number of troops. But here we go. So from a small trot now, Sin started to make his way forward. His royal bodyguard sort of leading the front lines here, so we'll follow them for a moment. Hung Lo's units, like I said, you can see from the mini-map, are making their way to the front. It's no sort of Minas Tirith charge, but I can see this being quite powerful. So he's got some of his sort of mounted Helmingers making shots. It looks like he's going to come in for his first charge. This is a unit of 253. Straight on in. Happy Meal's force is taking the brunt. That's 100 hit, over 100 killed in the first charge. So fantastic use by his forces here. You can see he's really sort of trying to slow the units down, really make them try and drop their equipment. Hung Lo as well, sort of moving through. He's coming around onto the flanks, trying to hit the back units. Now, our forces here are rushing their way over to try and stem the tide. Really just the only tactic we can really use against these guys is to try and lock them down within our own units, sort of bog them down, and really just have to take the assault, take the hit. And so what we're trying to do is surround these forces as best we can. Now we do have archers, however what I would say is the 8 damage of the archer forces by Isengard are a difficult, I guess, difficult to get many kills against these kind of troops. So really what we're doing was we're targeting the lightly armoured horses as best we can and cavalry, and trying to shoot them in the back. As you can see, right now, we're just dying left and right and trying as best we can to hold out. Now, Reavers are not poor against the cavalry, which is kind of why Sin's sort of using his archers to try and soften them up before the charges. Here's a good example of trying to wrap them in. So you can see that he's made a charge in on my front Reavers here, and I've tried to come around behind with 2 units to try and lock them down. And the basic idea is to try and stop him from being able to sort of slink his way out. And you can see we are starting to fail a couple of his sort of Riders of the Fallen Maidens, but Sin comes over to support them with sort of swamping numbers. Elsewhere in the battlefield, again, trying to keep him locked in. You can see here that Happy Meal's done a pretty good line trying to hold them back, and you can see that they have a couple of felled here. Meanwhile, Teemo's kind of leaving some of his forces in reserve, but they're going to get hit pretty hard now with frontal charge. Now, a question might be, why is it that we haven't placed ourselves in loose formation? Now, we were asked for thematics because, as you can see from the balance of power, it's extremely difficult for the defenders. So we decided that to try and even it up slightly, we wouldn't move into loose formation, except for our archers, I think we allowed them. So right now, Sin and Hung Low have really sort of been able to run amok in terms of our forces. They've been able to get through our back lines, and it's quite hard to follow for those watching. So I'm just going to slow it down ever so slightly and show you what's happening at the main wall. So the main wall, one unit has of Happy Meal slinked its way through. However, the downside is they're taking the full brunt of the sort of arrow towers, but they're holding up relatively well. I don't think that Hung Low is actually firing many of his archer shots in them. I think he's looking to save as much ammunition as he can. Teemo has tried to make a little bit of a wedge formation in the back lines here, seeing the forces that Hung Low had that sweeped around from behind, and the rest of the units just kind of making their way over as best they can. But we are doing relatively well. We're not doing too poorly. We are starting to work them down, but they're still very much a threat. They certainly aren't tired in any way, and you can see Sin really in his element here, charging the Uruk-hai and really muscling his way through. Like, at some points he's not even worried about turning his back. He's just going to push those Royal Guard light infantry through, and he's not even losing anything from it. Now, it's at this point we start having problems. Like 110 unit there of Reavers routing by Happy Meal, which is really unfortunate. So really having the point where our morale is starting to hurt us. The other thing is that we're still a little bit spaced out, so we got a little bit pulled away. So some of the missile cavalry that Sin had was very good at being in skirmish mode. And you can see some of my units are a little bit far out from the main group. Now, partly that's also for thematics, and also partly because I wanted to try and get my hands on the light infantry, but I wasn't able to get them. I was hoping Sin would be macroing elsewhere, but I have a feeling that he probably had them in skirmish formation. But you never know, maybe he just spotted it. Sin's pretty good with his map awareness. But you can see this, the sheer number of dead here, just the lines from that frontal charge when we first took it. Now, we're starting to reform ourselves slightly now, trying to get on this sort of little bit of this raised hill, falling back to Teemo's main forces, and being harassed in the behind as we do it. And Sin's making the most of the situation, trying to just charge the rear-facing forces of Happy Meal. As Teemo still waits to sort of bring in his reserves. On this lower side, again, we've had a little bit more luck. So I'm using my archers as best I can. Again, trying to shoot them in the back and in the rear. So you can see that they aren't getting the most in terms of damage and not really are falling, but they are taking off some of their extra hit points. They are sort of taking off the ones here and there. And to be honest, they have the ammunition to spare, and if I don't use them now, they're only going to die. So you can see the shots coming over the top, and we start making now, many people call it a little bit of a noob box, and unfortunately it probably does seem a little bit like that. And in fairness, maybe we should have continued sort of going out, but you know, it was getting to the point where we felt the Sin probably had his fair share of kills, as me and Happy Meal's forces are pretty much wiped out. Teemo's forces left in reserve, still the only ones going, as Happy Meal continues to make his way towards the front gate, and he has in fact so what's happened here is that Sin isn't even going to wait for the battering ram to make its way to him. He's going to charge out his Marshals of the Red and go straight for these raiders. Obviously fancying his chances, his Happy Meal is a little bit overextended. There's only really 2 units up here, and he still has his cab, so he's going to make a bit of a sally out. And the other unit here is sort of struggling with these ladders. I think they're possibly having a little bit of problems getting up, but he is coming back either to support himself or a misclick here. So we're just going to watch as the Marshals of the Red come charging out to face off. And Happy Meal in fact sees them and drops the battering ram to engage. Unfortunate formation for Sin, but it does work out okay with the arrows coming through. He doesn't want to be too wide or he covers for his friendly fire, but I don't think that Sin intended to have his units in a big long stretch of a line. And Happy Meal now wrapping around to try and make the most of this. But I still think that the Marshals of the Red will not have too many problems. And you can see here, he's going to go in and he's sent 3 units against this one force. And actually getting a good charge off there, so well done him. So some good rear attacks there from the Orcs, and really good play from Happy Meal. The sally out may now unfortunately not be working in Sin's favour as more and more units come in. But it looked like he was going to go for a rear charge, but changed his mind there. I don't know if you noticed that on the screen. Very quick unit. And he looked like he was going to go in for the rear charge and then fainted out. And he's actually pulling those forces back. So over in the main line, you can see that Sin's really pushing in. Even though we've got a box, you can see he's just crushed this centre. Making the fact that we're relatively sticky. We're definitely compact. And there goes the first of the generals. I think that's Sin's actually, which is unfortunate. So I think it was him up here. Yeah, so he's up here. So really unlucky actually against the Orc Raiders. Relatively healthily grouped still. So he just got caught there. As you can see, more and more of the Reavers. So the basic tactic we've got here is that the heavy infantry will take the brunt of the hit, probably lose about 100 of the charge, let's be honest. And then the idea is that the Reavers would then follow up behind to try and cut them down, or alternatively try and wrap around them. Now it's becoming more and more difficult to get that tactic to work, and I think actually my units are facing the wrong way there. Yeah, so always good to know that your units aren't facing the right direction. But it's becoming more and more difficult to wrap around them as we start losing more and more units. But in fairness to us, we are starting to stem the tide of the losses. We are getting to the point now where we start to feel like we've got a little bit more control of these front lines. And we're not breaking as much as we were before. Marshals of the Red still fighting on. We look down into their point of view. They are sort of surrounding all sides. And actually, everyone even has a unit here he hasn't yet committed. So he obviously feels relatively happy with the situation. He doesn't want to tire out his units unnecessarily. But I expect they probably will come round momentarily. As archers now firing high and over. Still going for the bodyguard, even though the general's gone. But I don't blame him for that. It's the nearest unit. As we come in following with the lancers. Didn't get as good of a charge as I think Sin was hoping there. I think it's getting to the point now where it's a little bit more difficult to get those charges off. But he's still having to control a lot of units. So you think that it gets easier as it gets longer. And partly it does, but he doesn't really have any units that have been wiped out. So he still has the same number of, I guess, total units to command, even though the number within them has fallen. So he's still making some good charges. He's still taking out some good hits and kills here, but he is starting to run low. So the mass of his forces are starting to become a bit more difficult to drive through. But you can see compared to how it was before, it's probably about half the number up here than previously. Now Timo's got yet another line of defense sort of waiting in reserve, which is his veterans. So he obviously is being quite conservative with his units here. Whilst we continue to try and hold out, using up as much as our ammunition as possible. As we'll just follow this charge going in. The brave men of Rohan. Will they get their lances down? They do. They do get stuck slightly on some forces, but they do drive through into my raiders. Again, not getting as So he's got them a bit split. So about 100 again, probably from 50 and 50 from both of the units that I've merged in there. But each charge he's losing a little bit, so he's getting a bit blobbed down here. And you can see there's the side charge coming from one side and the side charge coming in from the other. Just trying to lock these guys in, try and stop them from escaping as I reposition some of my Reavers that I've been holding back, trying to save as best I can. As arrows continue to try and pick off the odd one or two or remove a couple of the health points. Again, we don't mind too much shooting into our own units because they're worth so little at this point. Over by the main city, just to head back over there, you can see that Hung Lo has still got some of his cavalry remaining, and he is bringing them over to try and support, but he is getting shot point blank by Happy. But you can see that even then, he's still not really going down to any shots. I think cavalry is actually spelt wrong on that, unfortunately, so apologies there. And since Marshall's still battling on, so they know that they can't win. They're surrounded by what must be about 4 units now, but they're still holding out. But if these guards can get some good rear charges on the raiders, it may well change that. They're still firing with their Helmingers. He's still working on stopping the ladders from getting placed up, but I think Teemo's ladders will now get into position whilst they drop the other one from the charge from Hung Lo. Is it going to get there? Close, close. And unfortunately too slow. So the ladders have made it to the walls. However, here the bodyguard are cutting into them as another general goes. That's Hung Lo's general, I believe, dying in the charge, leading his men in. Those poor Marshals of the Red still fighting bravely. As you can just see the devastation, but a lot more. Look here, a lot more of the cavalry starting to fall. You can see their losses happening in this location now as they start getting really bogged down and really starting to get hurt. So at this point, I'm pretty sure that I just start charging my units out to just try and so you can see that I haven't really got many forces left at this point. Now, the majority of my units I've basically had charging out at Sin to countercharge him. Now, partly the reason why I countercharge him is one for entertainment, but also because I had a lot of units which didn't have many troops in them. So the idea was that rather than hitting some of Teemo's more healthy, larger units, that what I would do is it would slow down and take the impact of the heavy charges on my weakened forces, thus making the charge that Sin did into the back lines and the main force weaker. And it seemed to work relatively well. As you can see here that these bodyguards probably need to withdraw and do a recharge again on the cycle. However, these knights doing pretty good actually, losing one, taking out about, I'd say, between 30 and 40 there. Not getting the charge off there, unfortunately, not in the way I think they'd hope. But the mass of these guys probably mean they'll get a few kills. Otherwise, you can see that the forces here haven't really made much of an assault on the walls just yet. Haven't really got much up. A couple of the sets of ladders, but not much else. Again, mainly the focus happening with this cavalry charge, which is continuing to going on. So we're coming up to about a third of the way through the battle. And you can see that Sin is still brutally removing, and he's now going for the archers, brutally removing more and more of our sort of forces. There you go. You can see me coming out with a small unit here, just trying to stop them in their tracks, trying to stop them from charging. And the idea being as well is that trying to make it so that Sin doesn't get a full run up to get his lancers down. Again, trying to negate some of that charge damage. But he is starting to run low. He is starting to get to the point where his nobles and his royal guard are starting to run out of troops, and he's starting to lose steam a little bit, especially now that his troops are becoming winded. That's how long they've been fighting as well. So a lot of the time he's now having to withdraw, reposition himself, especially each time that I charge out to meet him. He's having to go that little bit further away. There's some broken troops. Stop dying, you cowards! A little bit further away to make sure he gets that run up. And each time it lets Teemo reform himself slightly to prepare for the next assault. And he still has a healthy 3 units of Dunland veterans. So just to pick up the pace then, I'm just going to put it back up to normal speed. as we watch sort of Sin preparing himself for another Rohan charge. As you can see, I send out a sort of a small group of 18 and not I suppose incredibly small group of 90, but we'll see how the 90 do as they charge out. Yeah, they get vaporized, but they do withstand some of the attack. And you can see here I'm sending the Reavers out as well. Again, trying to use the breadth and the width of the Reaver force, because it was still relatively healthy, to try and get around the sides of the cab. It didn't pay off because I think they didn't lose very much, and actually Sin comes in with another charge. It's going quite quickly. I know it's a bit weird because you've been watching a cab fight for some time, but it's so fast at full speed. It's quite hard to indicate how keeping track of it. You can see I'm sending more and more of my units out just to try and finish off the last of Sin, because we've still got a relatively healthy reserve force, and I think even I have a full unit of Reavers knocking around. I think those there, yeah, 211. So, and I've still got some archers. So you can see I'm just like I'm not going to wait for Sin. I'm not going to let him sort of do this. I'm going to go charging out and go and face the brethren of the Rohan people of the Riddermark, and be very sad at the Reavers that are breaking there. As again, Sin repositions himself on sort of this slight hill to go for a downward charge. As we watch again, will they get their lances out in time? You'd hope so. They've had enough time to do so. There they go. Now they actually unfortunately hit a routing unit before hitting my main line of archers. These archers actually are out of ammunition, which is why I sent them in. And so the archers, really, you think would have lost a lot more than that, but they did hit the, unfortunately hit the routing units, which has slowed them down. And then I've been able to use my Reavers to come up behind. So any that pushed a little bit further through, not sure what killed that one, a little bit further through and slowed down, then slow into the Reavers, which then can start chopping away. And that's the basic tactic, because I still have one unit of archers, I think, firing the last of his shots. Teemo's still sitting back slightly, although I think most of his attention now is probably moving up to join Happy Meal. Nope, my apologies, this is all Happy Meal up here. Except for one unit from Teemo, which I think is now re-picking up. Nope, Happy Meal's gone and picked up his ladder to push it back in. And Happy Meal now going for the main gate as well. I think that this ladder here was a little bit bugged, so it is up there, but you won't see as many people using it, so it was a bit of a struggle. But you can see some of the losses that Happy's taken, but he does get the second set of up, and he is now taking the ram forward. The rest of his units kind of holding back at this hillock here, while still getting a couple charges from Hung Lo, who has got some depleted cavalry forces still going. Charging slightly uphill there, so I think that's probably a little bit difficult, but he doesn't need to consider about getting these guys out, as they are now going to get sort of surrounded a little bit. He does still have some archers that are still firing. Back over with Sin. Again, you can see that line becoming thinner and thinner. As I continue to charge my units out to meet him. Teemo moving his forces forward, starting there making their way a little bit closer to the main gates. Again, trying to use my Reavers to try and get into the sides, try and isolate troops, try and cut them down. You can see they aren't unsuccessful. As the hit points of the cavalry start falling, you can see that as we start sort of sandwiching them in, drawing them into charges and then wrapping around them, we do start taking them down, and each one that Sin loses is costly because they can kill, you know, tens of units when they charge in effectively. You see, he's actually going to pull those nobles back and try and get out of there because the forces continue to surround, and we aren't as tired as I thought, as you might think we are, because of the way that we've had a sort of layered defense as I continue to run my units around. Actually, the Reaver's stamina, I was quite surprised about how good it could be, because they've been charging around like nobody's business, not really stopping, trying to catch up with this cavalry. And soon, actually, you're going to see that the forces on the other side of the river will begin to make their way over. It's not going to be too much longer until they're unleashed. And when that happens, well, I mean, the wargs are going to come charging for it. And Sin needs to prepare for it. The main gate is pretty much as you'd expect it to be. It's a difficult fight for the walls, which are being held right now by, unfortunately, the Helmingers, but the Helmingers are winning their fight. I'll go and show you in a moment as they fight on the walls. Again, sorry for zooming around, it's just because the battle's two distinct places. It will start to sort of come to this location soon. But you can see that the Helmingers not really having too much difficulty with these raiders. So, and since they share ammunition with one another, I think Hunglo doesn't mind using them in melee, saving his better units for melee for later. As Habimil tries to try and hold this little hillock here. Sin still valiantly doing the best he can to try and chop down as many forces as possible. And we're just going to watch a couple more charges as he comes in. Again, you can see this tactic of taking out these smaller depleted units, softening up that charge, to try and make it less impactful as it comes into the main force. You can see as soon as I go back to full speed how fast it really was to deal with, and especially for Sin controlling the cavalry, because he's got nearly entirely cav. This is almost all of his army was just cav, and he's having to control each of them individually, and they do move quickly. You can see how fast the Royal Guard are charging in. I'm not speeding this up, you can see here from the timings. They're just that quick. But partly it means that Sin has to be very quick in terms of the orders, because if he wants to back out from a charge at all, he needs to stay relatively fast. As you can see, they are going to get wrapped up here, I think, and they're going to struggle as they push through to try and get around the units and the cav, taking out sort of 2 to 3 there. Again, it might not seem much, but when you've got a unit of 13, losing 2 or 3 will start to sort of wear you down. As Sin starts looking, I think, possibly to consider going for these veterans that are the sort of the final hold. And you can see my Urukai archers still firing away, and I've got a couple of Reavers still knocking around. It's getting to the point now we're getting more and more confident as we come off of our hill. Still pleased or happy with what we've got remaining. Some of our stronger units there. And over here you can see that the Wardens of the Wind did unfortunately fall, and Hunglo still trying to harass as best he can. He made some good charges here, but he is starting to lose a few here and there from just running out of health. But the Helmingers really doing a number on the first assault, and you can see they've almost wiped out the unit on one side down to 8, and then this is a mixture of Timo's units here, so they're starting to fill up the walls now, but they're still pretty confident of victory. And I think that partly what they could have considered is possibly having a melee unit up there and then shooting up into them. But regardless, they are doing a bit of crossfire off of the walls into the units trying to get through the main gate. And against these dismounted Royal Guard, I don't think they're going to struggle. If anything, I'd be tempted to not fire into the blob, but they don't seem to be having too many problems. No, not too much in the way of friendly fire. Most shots going out into the reserve forces that Happy Mill has, as Hunglo's cav tries to go around for another charge. They do get their lancers down. Make a good charge into the archers there towards the back. You can see the forces over the river are now starting to slowly make their way over, and this is sort of the beginning of the end for Sin and his cav. So he starts to just kind of send them in now to just kill as much as possible. He knows he doesn't have long before these wargs arrive, and when they do, that'll be it over. We are starting now to put our veterans in. I think I've still got some Reavers knocking around, maybe. I think I have something. I definitely have some archers somewhere. Yeah, those are my archers, but yeah, so you can see Sin's force now just really kind of looking a bit more pitiful. An odd splatter here and there, which is really making it difficult for the mass purposes. So you watch them go for a rear charge, I think, into the back of the units moving around. And there you go, there's my Reavers coming out for the counter charge there, and my archers then trying to swamp them in. Again, it's all you can really do at this stage, and then Timo's coming in to support as well from the flanks. Just trying to get those counter charges off wherever we can and just swamp around them, just try and stop them from being able to escape. I think there's the wargs in the background, although they don't seem to be heading this way very quickly. But they will, I promise you that. Sin's force now down to just such a tiny handful. Especially struggling now that they've lost so many hit points and going up against the veterans. You can see them falling relatively quickly when they charge into those units. It's okay when they're going into the archers that I've brought to the front lines, but a little bit more difficult when they go into these forces. Ladies and gentlemen, is how you try and deal with a much more superior cav force with numbers. It certainly isn't pretty though. You have to follow the sort of Napoleon style of victory, which is throwing enough people into it until the other side loses, or alternatively the cannon fodder style. Have victory at some point. Here comes the flood, so you can see the Warg Riders coming in now. Sin thinking, right, there's not a great deal I can still do, but I'm going to go down like a hero. Charges his forces in, and the Wargs are going to come in and just sort of swallow them up. Nom 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 nom. Which is the moral of the story. Nom nom nom. But you can see just the devastation. And you can see where the battle lines were really drawn each time as well from the losses. Hunglo has a couple of units left, but really they're going to get chased down by Happy Meal's Wargs, so we're going to move over to the main gate now. Now some of it's going to be a little bit of formation and forming up as more and more of the units come over. So I'm just going to start the... oops, maybe that's a bit too fast. Start fast forwarding slightly. Let the battle speed up. There isn't a great deal that happens at this point while we form up onto the ridgeline. They attempt to take more and more of the walls. You can see the Helmingers are starting to lose numbers just from the numbers pushing over the wall and just the sheer weight of forces. But I think the majority of their ammunition had been used up by this point, and they are just picking off the last of Happy Meal's archers. I think that's... I probably wouldn't bother, based on the fact that I know how much damage these archers can do, and how long they've been firing for so far in the battle. Actually, I think friendly fire is probably more likely to kill those guys. But I think I probably would leave them to it. I don't feel like they're probably that much of a threat. There's probably more punishing infantry on their way. I think that Happy Meal even is trying to bait them slightly with this troop here. Isn't even looking the right way. Maybe they broke and then have come back. But you can see that the door is secure for the time being. The Wargs now have full control of the plateau outside, and the main bulk of the elites are slowly formation marching up in a very Isengard fashion. I'm sure that Saruman would be proud. But what can they do against such reckless hate? You got to get that in at some point. So while they form up, I'm just going to sort of show you quickly how the map works. So you can see that the main walls here, the wooden walls, sort of defend the main frontal area. You can see there's a slight curvature back here, and sort of squared on the same side. So it's not just a mirrored village. There's a little bit of cover for the attackers in terms of minor hills, but really it's kind of an open sort of viewpoint. And then as you come into the city, it's got the main entrance here unless we decide to blow any holes in the walls. And then there's three real pathways there. So there's one up through this side here, which can then join up to this main central point to then hit the town centre. Alternatively, so if I go past these sort of rocky outposts, or you can use one for a vantage point, you can go up this side here and it joins up into the back. And then that all finishes in front of the large building. You can't walk inside the buildings, they are blockers, so we will have to go through the streets. Looks like it's just a little farming town. There's one house that seems to be either a bungalow or possibly into the floor. I think it's probably a bungalow. We'll give Sin the benefit of the doubt. But he did make this in a few hours, actually. Sin's getting to the point now where he can really build scenarios relatively quickly. What I would say is that people may consider this battle not to be as balanced as some of the previous ones. This battle was designed to be a bit more of a fun piece rather than necessarily a balanced piece. Sin has got to the point where he can either get a battle balanced in the first or second try if he wants to. Right, we're just going to slow it down back out to normal speed now. As you can see, what they've done is Sin has moved his Hellhammers up onto the walls to really just clear these off. Now, you might wonder why these ladders have fallen down. They've actually been technically destroyed. You can see the damage there listed as 100. So these ladders have been destroyed and we can't use them anymore, which is really difficult for us because unlike, say, Edoras, where you can smash down with a ram the walls because they're a palisade, these are actual walls, although admittedly wooden. So losing those ladders was a real pain for us because it meant the Sin could really just kind of block off the locations that he wanted. As you can see, the fiery balls of death trying to make their way through. Although I think I'd probably consider wheeling my catapult up here to fire through the main door. But and actually what he's done is he's even been able to push us out slightly. You can see that the secondary army of Hellhammers actually pushing the main unit out. So I'm cycle charging my wargs in just to try and push them back. Try and get some charges in there, try and get some kills, and really partly because I don't feel that the wargs are going to be so useful once we get into the city, just because of the way it's so confined. So any opportunity I've got to get some charges off, I'm going to take. Now we did find some ladders that were on the floor that had been knocked down from units that had been sort of killed on the way up, and we have been able to get them up. These still exist, but again, they're still a little bit buggy, so you can see that some troops have made it onto the wall. And they're stopped. Now, partly it could be because Teemo's there, but it's never stopped units from jumping on there before. Again, so you won't see too much going up that way. So you've got a single ladder there we can put up, and they've got these two here, which are about to get on the walls. But, yeah, so from and you can see now as well the crossfire coming in. So this is almost point blank straight into the sides. Again, I'd consider maybe saving the ammunition. I think they were probably a little bit too free with their ammo against what is ultimately a cheap unit. I think the Hammer Guard would have no problem taking out those Reavers and Raiders as the pikes of the Urakai now start making their way in. We're just going to go down for a close-up here. So, up until this point, we've had the odd Reaver, the odd cheap unit. We're now going to start muscling in the more expensive forces here as we start to work this choke point, which you can see has layers upon layers of defense. And what Sin's done is he's got some pikes, and he's layered within that his helm hammers. So he's got a little bit of reach, but he's also got his sort of main pushing shield wall. As you can see, the pikes coming down, locking themselves in, and trying to go for a bit of a push here. Now, this is the point where possibly they've layered themselves up a little bit too much, and that partly might be the reason they haven't brought the catapult forward. So the catapult's having to go for some really long shots. You can see he's going for the waiting units back here. He is getting some nice hits, although it is a little bit of a cheaper force, and but he is getting sort of 30-40 a hit. It's kind of these units here when they start pushing through he wants to go for. I do have some skirmishers, which I am using to throw. So I'm throwing through just at the expensive units here. I don't care about hitting my own units in the back, and I think I actually move those walks slightly closer. I do there, so try and get them closer, get some better hits, and throw those javelins inside, going for these expensive units. You can see some of the jabs flying over and hitting some of them. They almost can't miss unless they hit the actual gates itself, which I thought was a pretty good use for them, because again, I didn't feel there'd be too much for them to do once they got inside the walls, and actually once the ammunition is gone, the jabs don't really do much anyway. The real advantage is the pace that they can move around. The fireballs still keep coming in, getting a nice good hits again, rolling down the hill, and taking a good portion there and a couple of wargs. Still, I think he's trying to take out these Trolls of the White Hand, but struggling slightly just to get the hit. as we continue to force our way in here. But think about what you can do if you can get that catapult closer. But partly one of the reasons we're pushing so many units into that fight is because we know that the catapult isn't nearby. As you can see, this sort of weird half-moon shape as people wait to go up this singular ladder. Again here, because we've got no siege towers, so everything just becomes very slow and difficult. Again, charging of the wargs forward. This is Happy Meals now, just trying to continue to push and force. Just trying to break up that formation as best they can. As again, you can see here that the Hammer Guards again pushing us out. So we've got pikes, we've got reavers, we've got heavy infantry, we've got raiders, and they're just getting muscled out by this force. Partly, I think maybe muscling us out is slightly to his detriment, as it means that we can't get around them and get a little bit more units to bear. But in the same sense, it's certainly making it difficult for the pikes, as these catapults still keep firing forward, trying to hit these back lines. As you can see, UMAG Commander's forces just kind of waiting their turn, the sort of inevitability of it all. The walls here starting to fall. They're starting to pull back their Helmingers, probably because the crossbow fire is coming in now as well from those more elite troops that have come back. Getting, again, a couple of good hits, but maybe it's the point where he needs to think about saving his catapult for when they get deeper inside. The Hellhammer's having no problem with the Reavers that are jumping over the top. The Reavers aren't a bad unit. Again, they've got AP, they're relatively cheap, they're good number. As we start seeing the Trolls, so this is the point where we've had enough of this main gate. We thought, right, we're not going to push through with the units we've got. We just don't have the mass. The Helmingers are just too good, and so it becomes a flood of Trolls. As you can see, that everyone is now trying to push in behind them. Now, the idea being that we want the Trolls to try and muscle their way through, break up the formation, just try and make that little bit of a gap between units, and then just using numbers to then suddenly flood the gaps as they're created. And you can see that these guys are doing pretty well. Like the Trolls of the White Hand are very good, and actually UMAG Commander rates them higher than the Uluk High. I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that, but he does consider them, in his opinion, the #1 troll, and I would say that they're certainly up there. I think they're probably #2 for me, followed then probably by Gundabads. But you can see them there forcing their way through as Donald starts sending up his. So his forces are going to come and join the battle. And you can see they've made a good movement through, and they are surviving. Now, it's always risky sending in Trolls without melee sort of infantry support, and it can become quite difficult for them. You can see here that normally they would get isolated and taken down, but these Trolls are very good, and they're doing very well, getting a good number of kills as the second group muscles in after the first. See them there. So these are the ones sent in by Donald. So you now have about 24, assuming none of them have perished. A couple of them perished. You've got about 20. 20 Trolls now piling into this area. And here come my Trolls. Or is this UMAG Commander's Trolls? Pretty sure they're my Trolls. Yeah, they're my Trolls. So now we're into 30 Trolls. So 30 Trolls have now muscled into this area. Now, in fairness, at this point, it doesn't matter how you back yourself up with infantry. You've got 30 Trolls. And you can see that we're starting to push them out a little bit. We're starting to try and go for easier units, rear units, ranged units. And you can see that Donald's pushing his Trolls through to go for these Shield Maidens. They're just kind of walking up to them, but they will charge into them in a moment. Again, trying to disrupt them, trying to slow them down, try and stop that very aggressive, armor-piercing. It's actually Happy Meal gets some of his Warg Riders through. Armor-piercing hammers. Now they are, axes. They are in defensive formations. They are getting some really good throws, even though they're under attack. And as you can see, the Helmingers still firing into that blob. As we look relatively confident on the walls, as we start to try and knock them down. You can see that the first wall is being knocked down, and the Marshals of the Red are going to charge to try and take us on as we prepare ourselves to charge through. I bring up my skirmishers here to try and throw in at the marshals, and it's an invisible wall. So we weren't quite sure what happened here. You can see them all just trying to push through. But I'm not going to complain as I start throwing my javelins straight point blank into the marshals, who also try and charge through the hole. So it looks like they're having one hell of a fight as they start running into each other before realizing that we can't actually make our way through, which was very disappointing as we were really looking to flood through that location. You can see we even got some of our trolls over to try and support that charge, but it just didn't happen, I'm afraid. As you can see here, we're still having trouble getting up this ladder, so we kind of just gave up. But that was a real disappointment, and now you can see we just try and move all these units further along as we just knock down another wall in the hopes that that can get us through. That's over here. And you can see they start flooding forward, they're going for it, the Reavers making their charge in, and no. They get stopped. So it was another wall that unfortunately didn't go the way we wanted. So everything's now coming through the hole. So you can see us now just forcing our way. Force, using those trolls, using the cab, using everything we've got. Sin countering with his hammerers, which we're trying to take out the trolls up here, just trying to make it so the shield maidens can continue to throw without being harassed. But at this point, we're just driving our way in. And the balance of power is relatively much in our favour now, and we're relatively confident victory, even though we couldn't get these walls down in the sense that we could walk through them. You can see the Reavers just like, trying to make their way through where you might commander. But we're pretty confident. The front gates are falling. The muscles of the red are sort of out of position slightly in the sense that they aren't able to really form themselves up. Except for this sort of staggered positioning, and the floodgates have opened. The Helmhammer's retreating now to try and find a better chokehold, a better location. There's more and more of Isengard just flooded, and we aren't short of units. We really aren't. You can see that the units out here just waiting for their moment. There's more and more units to try and go through there. I don't know. I mean, that must be about 4 or 5 troop units just trying to make their way through. You can see as well, more of our ladders got destroyed. To the point where we only had one ladder left really remaining, but it was okay in the end just because, well, I mean 30 trolls. The shield maiden is still throwing, they really can't miss into this blob. This is kind of the moment where you want to get a good catapult shot. I'm just wondering what happened to their catapult. You can see it now being repositioned and moved. So they are trying to move them along, and I think they do want to hit and shoot into that location. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens when they set it up. You can see that they're going to get 2 units of Hellhammers going to support it in their front lines, and a third one up in the front row to try and stem the tide. The cavalry there from me with the Warg Riders just trying to push in. Again, I really want to try and get these shield maidens off the field. Either just trying to make them retreat themselves so they stop throwing into the blob, or try and get some kills as they attack them in the back, sort of backing up the trolls that are there. I think Hunglo may leave them as a slightly sacrificial unit, allowing more and more of these hammerers to get away. As the catapults slowly start getting set up, although the other 2 are a little bit far away, hopefully they'll come and join it soon to fire into this block, because this will be perfect. But the thing is, the longer they take to get into position, the more we start to spread left and right. And the opportunity that they had to kill hundreds in single shots is now losing them, and I think that maybe they should have considered moving that catapult earlier when they saw the defensive falling. As you can see, my cav now working around the side, going for these retreating Hellhammers and these Helmingers, just trying to hit them, wipe them out, clear them out, and Happy Mill sending his bodyguard here, I think to try and stop the Helmhammers from getting into formation, but I think he's going to be a little bit too slow. There's pockets of defense at the front lines, but really they're starting to be sort of countered and fell. You can see UMAG Commander's Wargs now going for this other unit of Helminga. Sort of nom 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 nom. And the catapult's finally getting into position, but they're really struggling with the terrain. You can see them there, and it looks like they've possibly missed leg day, because they're really struggling to get those catapults where they want them to be. And every time that they take and delay, unfortunately, getting the catapult into position, the more we get to spread ourselves out. You can see that Timo has noticed the catapult at this point, and he's going to start charging them alongside you, Mad Commander's trolls. Hunglo repositioning his helm hammers, and he's going to try and get his catapult out as the shots start coming in to try and snipe it. Unfortunately, just missing, but not missing getting these catapults swallowed up. And there you can see the guards of Orthanc starting to kill the crew, which I think will probably make a break for it at this point to escape. And it's a real shame losing that catapult, because it really could have got a good number of kills for them. So now it's the next layer of the city, one might say. I start moving what remnants of forces I have around to this side, leaving sort of the more elite forces to try and take on these sort of larger blobs with Timo. Happy Mill still has a relatively good number of troops, which we sort of still see them trying to make their way through here. As these Helmingers get really just kind of finished off at this point, and Timo's Orthanc sort of guards sort of run amok, really. As we sort of bring ourselves down to look at the real power again of the shield, sort of the shields of the helm hammers, as they actually are pushing back the guards of Orthanc, trying to retake those catapults. They really want them back to try and make the most of the situation. You can see them still keep flooding in as they push and push, just trying to reclaim what was lost. They're even going to send in those other two reserves, as they've realized that the only opportunity they've got, if they do want to win this, is getting that catapult back. I really love how these troops look. I really love the almost, I guess, Roman style shield. This kind of sense that as well that maybe they've been supported by the dwarves in their design, maybe the way that the dwarves support the design of helmets. They've also been able to make these helmet shields. But the pushing has been slowed, and I'm not sure what it is in there, but something is pushing their own units around. Can you see that? See them all jumping around? So they're all just kind of getting pushed and muscled around by the helm hammers, and it's throwing them around as though they were trolls. It's quite funny. It's like they're on a big trampoline or a bouncy castle. It's definitely one for like a top 10 funny video. They just keep pushing each other and just keep bouncing. We'll leave the trampoline for a moment and just come and look over the other side. So here you can see that we are also fighting on this side. Again, more helm hammers holding the line. I've sent in the remnants of my trolls. I think they're backed up with another unit of trolls, but they have got my skirmishers here. They have got the last of my infantry. This is literally everything I have left. And we've got some Nazakai here as well, which are fantastic. Now, partly what I want to do is try and break up the formation. I'm trying to push as best I can to just try and shop this shield wall. And really what I want to do is I want to keep trying to open this side to come through and flank around the back as the shield maidens come charging in. Now, having Mills Nazakai in Corindal's sort of heavy infantry, and I think Nazakai as well, or Lukai's got there. I think he has some Nazakai. Maybe it's just Happy Mills here with me. He's just trying to work these flanks as best we can. At this point, I'm out of ammunition on my skirmishers, and I'm just trying to use their weight to push. As we get a little bit of support now, I think from some pikes coming in. But you can see how long they're holding them back, and that's with trolls as well. Just looking to see how they, just trying to zoom in to see how they hold up. They sort of snagger skirmishers, making a good show for them, really, considering that they're snaggers. Definitely worth considering if you do take an Isengard army to take them. Without their ammunition, they aren't the greatest, but they can lock down archers. But their ammunition itself, you get the work. Look, who is it? Look who it is. Saruman. Up in his front lines, fighting with his troops. Going in there against some depleted marshals of the sort of the red. Swinging that staff of his around. And really going to town. He's actually got quite far out. He's a little bit alone out here. sort of one lone infantryman sort of strolling through like he's going to a picnic. But there he is. He's doing his thing. No real resistance anywhere else in the map, but you can see that Sin has actually been able to push them back. So he's been able to reclaim what was lost in terms of his catapult. And you can see, look at the push. Look at the push. Look how he's forcing them back. Unbelievable. It's like, and they are poor units. You've got Nazakai bodyguard in here, as well as the guards of Orthanc, as well as just the sheer weight of units. Look how many of them there are. Look at this. Look at how they push. And again, pushing on this side, although less successfully, probably because of the walls there. But and you can see that the heavy cavalry Warg Riders from Carandals having to come over to just try and stop the mass from pushing. Now, unfortunately, they don't look like they are going to get the catapult back up and running. For whatever reason, either they've got it stuck or maybe they've lost the crew. That shots you hear is from our catapults, not theirs, unfortunately. So on the other side, you can see that we're starting to disrupt their formation a bit more now. It's only really the Marshal of the Red left. I start trying to funnel with Happy Mill troops through this little side. You can see us forcing through. I'm forcing through my bodyguard at this point, my Unokai bodyguards. It's coming flank round the side, and it's really getting to the point now of all she wrote. The last kind of stand really is going to be here, as catapults come flying in and hitting their own troops. Does get a good hit there on a few of the troops from Sin, but I guess we're getting to the point where Saruman just wants the city taken, and there it goes. The end of the battle, really. At this point, we realised that there wasn't really much else to talk about. It wasn't really much else to show. Unfortunately, we don't have the kills, but I can tell you that Sin got over 5,000 kills on the battlefield. And the other reason that the replay finishes in the way it does is, unfortunately, we did have a slight crash, which was a real shame. We weren't quite sure what it came from, but it was such a resounding victory, we didn't feel like anybody really lost out from not seeing it. But you can kind of see where it was going. So the last pocket was defense here, and last sort of over there. In terms of the kills, you can see that we lost just over half, 63%. To 96, but again, this wasn't a scenario where Rohan was meant to be able to win. It was purely to see how long they could last for and to see how many they could take with them before Isengard then moves on to attack Helm's Deep and the rest of Rohan. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining and fun. If you do have any replays you'd like to send in, please feel free to do so. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. This was really just a quickie video before some of the larger and more entertaining scenarios that we sent through will be recorded and completed. Normally we don't record the videos of battles we played in, so you should see J Monster or Jordan, for most of you may know him as, doing a video which for us relatively soon, and I highly recommend you watch it. Thank you again. I've been me, you've been you, and this has been Third Age Reforged.